Awesome.
Thank
Thanks for
you.
sharing that, Luke.
Yeah.
Okay, so mistake number 2, not knowing the signs and symptoms of emotional abuse in sports. So this is something that I am so passionate about. Our goal in sharing this mistake with you is to arm parents and athletes with the awareness and tools to identify emotional abuse when it's taking place, which empowers the parent and athlete to exit a toxic, damaging environment. And ultimately, 3, remove the abusive adult from their position of power so that 4, you put an end to the toxic environment and culture. And unfortunately, this is more common than we want it to be. And the damage caused by this is something that we've had to help quite a few kids repair at this point. So, what are some of the long-term impacts, or what's the long-term damage or dangers of emotional abuse? Well, this will likely come as really no surprise. So, it's things like self-esteem issues, unstable mental and emotional health, low confidence, performance anxiety, development of antisocial tendencies, increased risk of clinical depression, among other mental health issues, deteriorating physical and mental performances, and the list goes on. So I played for a coach for 5 years at the pro level who is now banned for life from the National Women's Soccer League. And this is the professional women's league in the US. And this coach is now banned for life due to emotional and verbal findings of emotional and verbal abuse. That coach was one of 3 other NWSL coaches to be permanently banned from the league as of January 2023. This all happened after US Soccer released this report in October 2022. And then a second investigation led by the NWSL and NWSL Players Association released this second report in December of 2022, confirming similar findings involving emotional abuse, and misconduct. So here's, I think it's important to read you part of this article from October 2022. It's by the New York Times, because I think it's highly relevant. So the topic of the article is report details systemic abuse of players in women's soccer. And the quote says, "Our investigation has revealed a league in which abuse and misconduct, verbal and emotional abuse and sexual misconduct, had become systemic, spanning multiple teams, coaches, and victims." Sally Q. Yates, the lead investigator, wrote in the report's executive summary. Abuse in the NWSL is rooted in a deeper culture in women's soccer, beginning in youth leagues that normalizes verbally abusive coaching and blurs boundaries between coaches and players. And I think it's also important to share that this wasn't the first investigation to have happened into the misconduct on my former pro team and the coach that I played for 5 years. I was approached back in 2018. By that time, I was playing for a different team in the league, and I agreed to share my story and experiences as part of that investigation. And so did some of my other, so did some of the other women on my former pro team. And then weeks and months and years went by, and I never heard anything about this investigation and its findings. So I couldn't help but assume that what I experienced was somehow acceptable and okay. I share this with you because in my experience, it can be really challenging to remove some people from a position of power when they really need to go. And this leaves our children in quite a vulnerable position. So this slide says, I didn't fully grasp that I was in an emotionally and verbally abusive environment. And I didn't get that fully because I didn't know the signs. So to speak on this a bit, what's unsettling, frightening, it still makes me sick to my stomach, is I didn't realize that I was in such a toxic, detrimental work environment. I knew it was bad and that I was being picked on. So were some of my teammates, and that it felt scary to be yelled at in the locker room like I was and my teammates were. But the thing was, it was such a slow drip feed of emotional and verbal abuse over time. And also, this person believed in me. There were times that it seemed like they really cared. And I saw the good in this person too, from time to time. And it wasn't always bad. But in hindsight, it was very unhealthy and damaging to my confidence, my self-esteem, among other things. And it took me 5 years until I was able to realize what was going on. And it wasn't my parents who helped me realize this, by the way. It was actually Luke who helped me to realize that there was a problem here. He helped me see the true reality of what was going on, and how I realized, wow, like I need to remove myself from this work environment. Like if I continue to stay here knowing what I know now, like I have self-respect, and I wouldn't be demonstrating that by remaining here. And so that's when I asked to be traded. So my highest hope is that through sharing a bit of this story and a bit of my story and the signs and symptoms of emotional abuse, which we'll get to in a moment, you and your athletes will be able to recognize this on day 1, day 5, or even week 5 or month 5, and not year 5, like the amount of time that it took me. And you'll be able to get them out of that environment, and or they will be able to be empowered enough to recognize what is going on for themselves and then seek help. And in my opinion, this is going to be particularly important when they're in college on their own and beyond. So here are some of the red flags of emotional abuse to be aware of. This is an article written by the Kemp Foundation, KEMP. It's titled Hidden Scars, a look at emotional abuse in sports. Luke, do you want to read this one for me? Oh, I can't hear you.
Oh, I said, yeah, sure. I was muted. So while we often talk about the long-term adverse effects that stem from physical and sexual abuse and neglect, the toll and trauma of emotional abuse can be just as damaging. According to the CDC, emotional abuse refers to behaviors that harm a child's self-worth or emotional well-being. Examples include name-calling, shaming, rejecting, withholding, love, and threatening. Children who have suffered emotional abuse or neglect may find it difficult to form healthy relationships, become overly reliant and dependent on one person. So what do they call that? We got that. What they call
I know what you're referring to. It's not coming to me right now. Mm-hmm.
Yeah. Or develop problems with emotions and memory. So within the world of sports, emotional abuse is an under-acknowledged but common form of abuse that occurs at all levels, from youth and grassroots amateur sports organizations to professional leagues. Emotional abuse within sports and athletics typically manifests as shaming, mocking for poor performance, using inappropriate nicknames, denying attention, making threats of repercussion, and excluding or singling out individuals.
Thanks. Awesome. And then the article goes on to say, no matter the source, emotional abuse and bullying can have a lasting impact on athletes. These bullying behaviors can manifest feelings of shame and degrade self-esteem, pushing some athletes to leave their team or even quit the sport entirely because of it. Within the world of sports, Hannah adds, this is the person who wrote the article, the power imbalance between coaches and athletes can lead to that relationship degrading into an unhealthy one. So a few more red flags and example. We're actually not going to share examples in this one, but a few more red flags of emotional abuse.
Yeah, I can read these off if you want. Yeah, so
sure.
They're name calling, insulting, shouting, belittling, threatening, humiliating, scapegoating, ignoring, rejecting, bullying, taunting, stunning, shunning, isolating. I would add gaslighting.
Yeah.
Now, I just want to say as an aside, it's pretty obvious to us as adults, and I think everyone here would agree, is that at some point our kids are going to experience this. So
in some capacity,
yeah,
likely.
in some capacity. And I'll just say it for myself, if Jen wasn't, I believe if Jen wasn't as strong mentally as she is, she would have had some significant issues, because Jen was at the root of like the emotional abuse, getting very mistreated, and she sees the good in people, and really, you know, gives people the benefit of the doubt, and she got taken advantage of and mistreated like that. And it's, I don't know why people you know, are willing to do that to their players. And I know some coaches just lack emotional intelligence, and they think that that's how they motivate people, when I don't think any coach would want a team of low self-worth players. I think they would rather a team of highly confident players, people who are built up and they have their coach's trust. And I think that's, anyways, I've got a lot to say on this, but I'll keep going, Jen.
I love that. No, and so to add on to that, I think, like Luke was saying, we can all agree that, you know, us as adults, because I think we have mostly parents on this call, this is primarily a workshop for parents. I think we can all agree that we've all experienced this in some form or another. You know, maybe we've been insulted by someone, maybe someone rejected us before, right? So experiencing the things on this list, as we all know, it's unavoidable in life. And this is why we believe so strongly in the importance of instilling solid mental and emotional resilience in all people, and especially in children. So I've been told this in very, you know, by one person, and then I've heard variations of this quote by many different people, but the quote is, people turn a blind eye, and parents turn a blind eye because of the status of the team, because of the connectedness of a coach, for example. But it is my opinion that no coach, no matter how connected they are, for example, to the best club team in the area, the best D1, D2, D3 colleges, or to the pro level, no coach is worth this potential impact on our children. So to wrap this one up, what to do when you suspect, or when you know, your child is in an emotionally abusive environment, to put a stop to it and remove the abusive adult/coach from their position of power, and of course, from their ongoing access to other children. So here's what we have done in the past. We did this recently with a student athlete who we worked with. We helped support them in using this tool. We introduced it to them. There was a highly emotionally abusive coach who was actually on probation and still allowed to keep coaching, continuing to do the harm that they were doing. And now this coach is gone because this tool was used. Also, you know, so many kids had left this team because of this coach. The coach was allowed to continue on. This was a problem. So here's what you can do. Hopefully it never gets to that point. Here's the tool. So I encourage you to create a spreadsheet to document the emotional and or verbal and or whatever other abuse may be taking place. My recommendation is to be sure to include all of the following: dates, locations, quotes to the best of your child's memory, and other their teammates' quotes from other parents, quotes from of things that you've heard said. Write down specific players who were in attendance who can corroborate what was done and what was said. Then get other parents who are concerned to add to this list. The goal is to document as much evidence and specifics as possible. Because oftentimes when there's emotional abuse, and Luke might be able to help me explain this a bit better, but that gaslighting that happens, that questioning of your own reality, if you don't have these specifics, it can be very challenging, because likely this other person is very good at conveying their reality in a way that conflicts with yours. And right, so the specifics are very important. Then I recommend all parents involved deliver the document to multiple people who are in charge of the club or the team, not just one individual at the club or the team. This increases the chances of the report being taken seriously and dealt with in the right way. And by right way, I mean a way that maximizes player safety as soon as possible. And I found this to be helpful. I encourage you to, if you use this tool, to have one parent take the lead on getting this document together and a date by which they plan to have all additions added to it from other parents and players, because life gets busy and it helps to get this done as quickly as possible when there's that one point person. So thanks so much for sticking with us through mistake number 2, not knowing the signs and symptoms of emotional abuse. I'm going to hand it over to Luke for mistake number 3.